just before the next flying session tomorrow, Buckminster, but we're, so he's going to leave us for a little while. He may well be back later.
He's going to be catching up on the many, many, many emails that have come in today while I've been out flying.
Brilliant. We're there. We're recording, aren't we, Andy?
Yeah, we're live on YouTube.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. Thank you, Andy. We'll see you later. Just give everybody a little bit of heads up on news. We've been pushing at council at the BMFA, although we didn't have to push very hard. Thankfully, it was an open door. The In the Air Tonight sessions will become every day now, or every day, every year for the foreseeable future. So every Tuesday through the winter months, and we'll look at doing this at least once a month during the summer months. But it is going to be a regular occurrence now, so I'm really pleased to report that to everybody. You've seen Andy Sephton. He's been with me all the way through this journey. Well, he's got a wonderful presentation tonight. I'm told it could be a little bit controversial, or a few questions and answer sessions. So I'd like everybody to, give Andy a bit of warm welcome, and I'll let him introduce it, because I'm not quite sure what he's going to talk about now. I know it's F3 Res, but Andy, let's come over to you, please.
Okay, can you hear me all right?
Very good.
Just to make sure I'm there. That's what the presentation is going to be about. If I look as if I'm looking away, forgive me, I'm working two computers. I've got my presentation on this one, but the questions and answers are on that one over there, which is why you might see me looking to the side. So that's what I'm going to talk about. As far as I'm concerned, the challenge that we have at the moment is BMFA membership is reducing. I don't have the figures to hand, but I'm sure somebody will if we really need them. But membership is going down. Competition entry is reducing. So why is that? Why is competition entry going down in the BMFA? I would say put your answers in the chat window, but rather than having it go on for too long, I'm going to give a couple of suggestions. Is one, that it's too expensive, and two, that it's too complex. So leading on from that, I've got a couple of ground rules. By complex, too complex, I'm not saying that we should downgrade our national championship basis, because in order to be competitive in the world field, we have to have the national championship at a certain stage. So I'm not saying we should lower that, but really what we need to do is have lower grades of competition so that we can feed people in to get to the higher grades. And if you look around in BMFA competition, there's a number of disciplines where we only have the top level competition. There's very little around for people to feed into. And that's really what I'm going to talk about this evening. The competitions that I've been sponsoring are light scale F3 Res and F5 Res. And I'm not introducing those for people that currently fly competitions. I'm doing it for the people that don't. So what I'm saying on that side is not for the people that are doing soaring, and it's not for people who are doing scale RC flying. I'm introducing those to get people in who don't normally do it. So just bear that in mind as we go through. So we need to reduce the cost of competition modelling. How do we do that? There's a number of current initiatives going on. I'm not going to list all of them, but I'm just going to take one or two that are going on in various areas. I will say now, I haven't got anything on control line, and I do apologise for that. I will mention it at one point, but if the control line chaps can come up at a later date and do an IT-AT presentation, I think that would be very useful. So current initiatives, here's a few that I've identified that are available to club modelers, if you like. In free flight, we have the Peterborough Model Flying Club Flying Aces competition and the Oxford Model Flying Club Dreaming Spires competition. I'll talk a little bit more about those in a minute. SAM 35 have got a very good introduction to scale competition and a good introduction to RE duration soaring, albeit with classic and vintage type aeroplanes. In scale, we have light scale, and the Scale Tech Committee have introduced kit scale to lower the work that would need to go into the scale model to make it accessible rather than specialist. And they have kit scale both indoors and out. I'll talk briefly about all of those. And in soaring, we have F3 res and F5 res. So I will say that what I'm doing at the moment have not yet been taken up by the BMFA Scale Tech Committee, Soaring Tech Committee, nor have they been taken up by BARCS, although BARCS does have an F3, F5 res section on their site. So I'm going to talk very briefly about all of those initiatives. So starting with the Flying Aces, it's a day out on Peterborough's Ferry Meadows. This year it's 12th of September. If you want full details of it, there's the Peterborough website. Go on there and you can find out what it's all about. But from my point of view, there's 18 different competitions held over the day, 5 of which you can enter with just one single model that will cost you $17.39 from the Vintage Model Co, which I think is good value. That's the Cloud Tramp. That's what the kit looks like. There's 3 models that I've made from 3 separate kits. Obviously, you don't get all 3 in one. Those 3 will be at Ferry Meadows this year. So there's 2 there available for somebody to borrow if you like to come along and you don't have a model to fly. There's no builder of the model rule. There is a junior competition though, but we would expect juniors to have some do some of the building if they enter. So a junior could enter with one of those Cloud Tramps, but they can't really enter the junior competition. They can enter the 5 that are available. It's a great family day out as well. Just as an aside, there's a couple of restaurants, there's lots of parking, there's lots of things to do outside of model flying. So good family day out. If the family's not interested in models, lots of other things to do. I'm sure Mark will verify that. Yeah, I'm getting a nod. Brilliant. That's the right answer, mate.
I was muted. Of course. I mean, as a Peterborough Model Flying Club member, it is a brilliant day, and I spend a lot of time down in Ferry Meadows.
Yeah. It's great fun. The Oxford Model Flying Club hold an event at Dreaming Spires. Their last one was in 2019. There's nothing advertised this year, so I don't think they'll be doing one. I would hope that they'd continue it next year. That is very similar to the Peterborough Club's event, being a low-key on a very nice site just to the west of Oxford for what I would say affordable models. And taking one of their events as an example, we have a vintage and classic glider, 2 of which I built recently, which is a Caprice and the Inchworm. The Inchworm I built from a Bel Air part kit. I checked their website today. It's no longer being advertised, but I do know that the plan is available through Mike Woodhouse. So the model is still buildable. The Caprice, the kit costs about £30 and it's available from Ripmax stockists. So the outlay again is quite low for, I would say the Caprice is a highly competitive model in vintage classic glider, particularly for small sites such as Oxford, because the max will be quite low. Just for interest, that's the model in the foreground is the Inchworm, the one in the background is the Caprice. Very similar configuration of model, both of them 1950s vintage, and that's what the Caprice looks like when it's built up. Those are my house colours, red and yellow. Stand out very nicely in the air and on the ground, so I'm afraid you'll see a lot of that in the subsequent parts of the presentation. So on to SAM 35. I will say that SAM 35 had a very good control line scale meeting at Old Warden some years ago. I believe, and I'm sure Ian, oh crikey, I'm sorry, I've forgotten his name. I'm sure Brian Lever, I'm confusing you with Ian, Brian. I'm sure Brian Lever will confirm the numbers or correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there's somewhere between 50 and 70 entries to a low-key control line scale competition, which I think is quite phenomenal when you consider that we only get 4 or 5 entries in flying only control line scale at the nationals. So what are SAM 35 doing right and the Scale Tech Committee doing wrong? I can say that about the Scale Tech Committee because at the time I was chairman.
Andy, could I just come in a couple of questions which I think we ought to resolve very quickly? We are a bit we do get a little bit like a line of duty sometimes. Question: what is SAM 35? I'm sure you can answer that one pretty quickly.
I can. It's Society of Antique Modelers, Chapter 35. They go all around the world. Each country has a different chapter, and they look after vintage and classic model flying in the United Kingdom.
And just for clarity, for anybody who's sitting there going, what's he keep saying about res? Can you just describe what is the res size of it? You refer to
res is rudder elevator spoiler. An F3 res is bungee launch glider controlled by rudder elevator and spoiler. An F5 res is a electric motor launch glider controlled by rudder elevator and spoiler. That should come clear later. Thanks, Mark. So SAM 35 have a simple scale competition for traditionally built models. It's got minimum static judging with a very simple flying task. And for me, it becomes a very good introduction into the more complex flying task that you'll find on the BMFA schedule. So this would be a good place to start if you want to start with radio control flying scale models. The details are on the website. This is also applicable to the next slide that's coming up, but I didn't repeat the website on that one. But that gives you an into the SAM 35 rules, where you can find the rules of this and a lot of other vintage style competitions. For this one, I've chosen a Killcraft 40-inch Piper Supercruiser, which is a free flight model converted to 3-channel electric RC. The simple scale competition is fundamentally for free flight models with an engine control, either IC power or electric power, and then controlled by rudder and elevator, doing the simple flying task. Vintage Model Co. provide the kit. This morning it was at $65.99, and there's their website. So again, this becomes an affordable scale model. That's what it looks like in its bare bones, and I've chosen to color it in the color scheme of a German glider tug. Registration is DELTE. I've chosen this for several reasons. One, because I had the markings CAD'd already, so I did them for somebody else. Two, it's conspicuous in that I will be flying it free flight as well as radio, and I like my free flight models to stand out when they hit the ground. And being bright orange, that should hopefully be a model that I can find quite easily. And finally, the markings are very simple. There's a Piper Cub on the fin, and there's lettering on either side. So that was a relatively simple model to complete. On the duration side, amongst other things, SAM 35 have a vintage power duration competition for classic vintage model airplanes powered by electric or IC. There's 3 classes with small, medium and large engines, both electric and IC. I won't give you the sizes of the motors, but you'll find that in the rules, which was on the previous slide. And the motor run is limited, and they fly fundamentally to a max of 6 minutes. And if you gain 3 maxes, then you fly a fly-off. It's at the moment, a postal competition. It runs every Wednesday from now until September. And I believe it's the 12 best scores to count at the end. But it's, again, a good introduction into soaring type flight, where in this case, the motor gets the model up to height, and then you glide down searching for thermals. It becomes a relatively inexpensive entry into duration type competition. I've chosen the Killcraft Gaucho. You'll find the plan on AutoZone, and there's the link to it just there. It was a kit of the 50s. That's what it looks like. It's 44-inch wingspan. That's what it looks like in its bare bones, and that's what mine looks like now. It's covered. It's only done one flight. I'm keeping an open mind as to how it will form in competition, but I need a couple more flights to get the model sorted. But the fundamental for me is that this is a good, low-cost, low-key introduction into duration RC flying. On the scale side, this is one that I introduced as a member of the Scale Technical Committee about 3 years ago. Unfortunately, the Scale Technical Committee, I've now left, but they are considering stopping light scale because of lack of interest. So I would like light scale to continue. So I would like people to enter, please. If you don't use it, you'll lose it. The reason I'd like people to enter it is that Martin Kinder came up with the idea 4 years ago or so and suggested it to me as because the scale rules in the BMFA at the moment allow models up to 15 kilograms weight for RC, which creates large models that are expensive to build, they're expensive to motor, and they're expensive to carry around. They do fly very nicely and they fly very realistic because large models fly realistically. But it's high maintenance, high cost, and really high effort to make one of these models. We're unlikely to get anybody to start in RC scale flying with that type of airplane. So Martin suggested a maximum weight of 5 kgs, which would allow most club modelers have got a scale modeler of some sort in their fleet that has that sort of weight. So we have, what should we say, a number of people, a high number of people within the BMFA who would be available for such a competition. Unfortunately, the take-up has not been very good. However, I will say that we introduced the competition in 2018. In 2019, we had 4 new members enter the 2019 British Scale Nationals via the light scale route. So the light scale did achieve its aim of introducing new people into high-level competition. But since then, because of COVID last year and this year, nobody's entered it. So if we want to keep it for next year, I would ask the Scale Tech Committee to run it for at least another 12 months. Let's do it until the end of 2022. And if by the end of 2022, there's no further entries on it, then kill it off. But what I would like to see is that at the moment, light scale is a flying only competition. But I'd like to see the static rules come in. So if we get a number of people entering it and enough people entering it, then we can generate it into a full competition at national level. From my point of view, I've yet to enter a BMFA scale competition. So light scale is going to be the route for me. I've booked the next 4 competitions, which I believe the next one's at West London, but my first competition will be towards the end of June. I'm not sure which aircraft I'm going to enter, but I have an FMS P51 that I got on special offer for around 100 quid, and an Avios C130 that I bought in March last year, so that's yet to fly, for just over 300. And that, I have to say, is the most I've ever paid for a model aeroplane. So it's a first in many respects. That's what the P51 looks like. Excuse me just one moment. And that's what the Hercules looks like, or the C130. I fly Hercules for a living, and in the box, the markings included the Ranelagh prototype for their cockpit and cabin upgrade, for which I was project pilot about 15 years ago. So it had to go in those markings, which was rather nice from my point of view. On the free flight side, I hesitate to put this under a free flight. I'm calling it kit models. There's a number of kit scale initiatives that the BMFA Scale Tech Committee has brought in to lower the bar and make the models a little less fraught to build, although all scale models are quite a trick to fly. But this makes the scale models more available to the modeler by using a kit to start with, and then hopefully people will expand from the kits and go into the own design and scratch built area. I've got a couple that I'd like to showcase really. One is the Scale Indoor RC Kit Scale, a competition that was introduced last year, but not yet been held because of COVID. Hopefully we'll have a competition this year, if not next year. And for it, I built a 48-inch easy built Lysander. The kit's around 30 to 40 pounds, something of that order. I bought it from Sam's. Sam's at the moment has gone to Vintage Model Co, so it might not be available through them, but you can certainly get it through Easy Built Models in the States. And I built it as a radio control model as a experiment to see if I could get a 48-inch kit scale model to perform indoors and fly the schedule, which includes a figure of 8 and 1 or 2 other things. So that's more of an experiment for me, but there's a lot of smaller scale kit models that can be used for kit scale. The second one, BMFA Scale Tech Committee have also introduced an outdoor kit scale competition. And again, for this one, I'm using the same radio control Supercruiser that I'm using for Sam's, but I'll use it in a free flight mode. We've already covered the cost of the kit, which is, I think, is relatively low. BMFA Scale Tech Committee have introduced a gadget that will allow a model to be, or a model electric motor to be controlled by a profiler, but overridden by radio. So the model can fly free flight using the profiler to time the motor run. Should at any time the modeler decide that the model is flying out of bounds, caught in a thermal about to fly off, more importantly is about to hit somebody, hit a spectator, then you can take control with the radio and override the profiler to bring the aircraft down safely, which I think is a very good safety aspect of this type of flying. It also allows free flight models to be flown in a smaller field than you would normally do. And it also covers the safety aspects of electric motors, which until recently have put a lot of people off scale free flight electric. Electric motors provide the cheapest, easiest, cleanest means of flying a free flight model that I'm aware of. The other power sources are Rapier jets, JetX jets, rubber, and IC, but I think the electric provides the easiest route. And I think the Scale Tech Committee's latest ruling on using radio as a safety device provides a very good option for those who are starting out in free flight scale. So there's the DLTE again, and that's the Lysander done in prototype colors. Couple of words on that. I like minimal markings for this type of aeroplane because the markings don't gain too much in the way of marks. Minimize the markings, shortens the building time, and it reduces weight considerably. And I also like silver models because though silver shows up every single mistake you make on the model, it is the lightest coloring and provides a much lighter airframe than some of the other colors. So there we go. Right, on to soaring. This is really what I was asked to talk about. All the others are just a build up to this. F3 Res, F5 Res. This is a competition that I'm not introducing it, I'm supporting. It was brought to my notice by Martin Kinder. And that was following a competition that I entered within Barks, I think it was, for the 100S class. The 100S class is a class of soarer it was in the 70s. Bungie launched a 100-inch span with rudder elevator control. I built a model in 1980, but I've never competed it, although I've flown it ever since. I recently bought a Elan 100 kit, which was advertised, was reviewed in RCM&E about 4 years ago, built it and found it's quite a high performance model to the original 100S spec. I mentioned it at a BMFA council meeting. My good friend Simon V said, why don't you come and enter a 100S competition, which I did. And that's where all this started. 100S had changed considerably from the 100S that I was introduced to back in 1980. The models now are composite structures. They're launched by winch instead of bungee. They are very, very high performance, both on launch and in flying. And as a consequence, I came last in the competition by quite considerable margin. The other 8 aircraft were all the same thing. They were a Tracker 100, which was the high performance 100S glider. So I asked some questions and I said, what do I need to be competitive in 100S? This is a national soaring competition. And they said, you need a Tracker 100. So I said, well, how do I get one of those? And they said, you can't, because the factory that produces them was burnt down. And somebody said, oh, I've got 3 or 4 in my garage. And I said, well, can I buy one? And he said, oh, no, I need those. I said, okay, what about a winch? How much is a winch going to cost me? He said, oh, we can't get them at the moment. So I said, to be competitive in the 100S, I need a model that doesn't exist and a winch that you can't buy. And they said, yes. Since then, funnily enough, 100S competitions have been stopped through lack of entries. And I wonder why that is. I'll leave you with that thought. I was talking, or giving the story at another council meeting when Martin Kinder said, what you need is F3 Res. And I said, what's F3 Res? And he said, it's a European competition for 2-meter span soarers built predominantly from wood with rudder elevator spoiler controls launched by Bungie. And I said, what a good idea. He sent me a copy of the rules. I bought a couple of models, I built them, I've flown them, and I have to say I'm hooked. That led to me writing the article in BMFA magazine. In 5 or 6 years of writing the scale column, I've had perhaps a dozen responses. Within a month of the first article, I had something like 40 responses on F3 Res. And after the second article, I've had about 20 responses, and most of which I have to say have pointed out that I've got the date wrong for the 2 competitions that have been organised. But there we go. We'll sort that out in the longer term. So a lot of people are interested. I'm just going to go down one. We also have F5 Res, which is exactly the same, but it's launched by onboard electric motor rather than launched by Bungie. That is a slight V2, which is a kit model bought from Hyperflight. Cost is about £230, so it's quite expensive. Carbon is allowed for the main spar, tailplane spar, leading edges, and the tail boom, but the tail boom can only extend up to mid-chord. It can't go any further forward. Composite structures aren't allowed. You're not allowed composite covering, and you're not allowed composite leading edge. You can sheet a leading edge with balsa, but you can't sheet it with any plastic stuff. That's what she looks like when she's been covered, not in my normal house colours. And although the see-through colours look rather nice, I find them exceptionally difficult to see when the model gets up to height. So my next models went back to my house colours. As far as costs are concerned, kits are available from Hyperflight in the UK, costing about 160 to 240. I noticed on the website that they've now got a ARTF model available called a Circle Dancer, I think it is, at 330. They also sell the Circle Dancer kit, which is around 160. So you pay about 150 quid extra to get the model built. But if you want an ARTF model, that's what it's going to cost. And that really, for me, is how to get into competition flying. If you want to get into competition soaring, this is how to do it. Because the cost of the airplane, the cost of the launch system, bungees will cost you about £50. A motor is probably cost you about the same if you go for a low key one. You can get yourself in the air for less than 500 quid with a competitive model. The two that I've gone for here are the X-Res and the X-Res Electro. Both are £170. And as you can see, I've gone back to house colours now. The glider's on the right, the electric version is on the left. The only difference is the shorter nose and the motor on the front. The rest of the airframe is exactly the same. Both aircraft have yet to fly. So I don't know what the colouring is going to do in the air. I'm hoping it's going to be a lot better than the Slide, because I do have a lot of difficulty seeing that one. So where are we now with F3 and F5 res development? We have a Facebook group, and I checked this afternoon and we had 118 members, but while we were setting up this evening's talk, another person joined. So we have at least 119 members on the Facebook group. You will find the rules to the European rules to F3 res and F5 res on the Facebook group, although the rules that we will be running to when we have the competitions or the meetings at Buckminster in June and July will be a lower key version of those. But they will be close enough so that the models that we use in the UK should be competitive and eligible for any European competition should we get that far. But I would certainly advise you to join. If you have an interest in F3 res and F5 res, then I would certainly advise you to get onto that site. We've got the two meetings at Buckminster. If you could contact me to register for those, please. It's not so much a register in that I'd like to know the number of people that are coming so that we know what to organise on the day. The first one, the 19th, will be a day to look at launch systems, bungees, electrics, and see what the models can do and to see how we can organise competitions. If there's enough people interested, we'll organise a competition on the 20th. The 24th and 25th of July will be competitive competitions on both days, provided we get enough entries. I'm sure we will, because there's probably of the 100 people on the Facebook site, I think at least 40 are interested in 40 are building models and would be interested in competing. We have a possible event at Sherlow in August. John Minshall might be able to add a little bit to that later. And I'm setting up an email newsletter. I haven't sent any out yet, but I've got about 40 or 50 people interested in that, and I'm hoping to get something out next week. Again, contact me to register, and my email address is there. If you don't have time to write down the email address, you'll find my email address and my telephone number at the end of the F3 res, F5 res article in BMFA News, and at the end of every scale column in BMFA News. So if you pick up an old BMFA News, you'll find it in there. My number and email address haven't changed in about 10 years, so that should all be valid. How goes the time? We're almost there. I will add, actually, just before we go to questions, I was contacted by Darren of Cambria Fun Fighters, who's developing a model called the Condor S1 or the Candor S1. I saw a picture of it this morning and it looks very promising. He should be here this evening. I'll just check. Bear with me just a second. As I'm scrolling up. We've got Darren Graham, which I think, so hopefully when he comes on to the group chat later, then we can have a chat about his aeroplane. I don't know the cost of it, but it's in CAD at the moment. And as I say, it looks to be quite a promising airframe.
He's left Andy Wallet. He's left a couple of questions here. If you don't mind, if you want to have a.
Well, I've just got to the questions point now. So if you want to fire those up, while I'm doing that, I'm going to put that back up again.
Just to remind.
because guess what? I got the dates wrong in the BMFA news. Right, let's go for the questions then.
Right. Well, let's. You mentioned Darren, so there's a couple of points from Darren here. Some are going back to your earlier part of the presentation. Having been involved in a small way in E2K, I would say basic classes are the way forward. So that's that's very much a statement. Darren Graham also says Condor S1. You might want to refer to. I don't know that one, Andy, but you.
That's a model that I just mentioned.
Right, that's the one, and the Res version will be the Condor Res.
Excellent. He's going. Yeah, good.
So that's good. Right, going back to the top then. David Lovegrove. Most of the comp classes soon get taken over by expert modelers. This deters beginners who are quickly outclassed. How do you propose to resolve this?
By keeping it simple. If we keep it simple and we keep the model specification simple, what happened to 100S was that winches took over and composite structures took over. Modelers got very expensive. I think there's one on the market at the moment that would be competitive, but it costs about £1,200. And you're looking probably £500 to £700 for a winch. So you're looking at around £2,000 to enter that type of competition. If we keep the model spec as it is, and we keep the launch system as it is, the only expert side to it will be thermal hunting. And the way to do thermal hunting is to watch the experts and get lots of practice in. So you won't stop the experts from entering, and I wouldn't want to. But if we keep the specification tight and we keep the specification down, the advantage that they would have in cost and composite structures is very, very low. And it then comes down to the skill of the modeler on the flying side.
Fantastic. Chris Foster asks, and this is going back to light scale, if the take-up for light scale has not been great, how has it been advertised or publicised?
I've advertised it in my scale column. And that's all I can say to that. If they don't read it, they won't know, will they? But I do know there's at least a dozen light scale models being built. Whether they're completed or not, I don't know.
Louis Hawkins, I'm building an Res F3 Eagle RCM and RCM and E plan, September 2019. Will it be competitive, and could I use the wing with modified fuselage for F5 Res?
I don't know how that airplane flies, but I would say yes and yes. It'll come down to your skill as a pilot and in thermal hunting, and also in getting up the winch, because there is not the winch, getting up the bungee. There is a trick to getting the maximum height out of a bungee, which you can only learn by practice. So yes and yes.
Colin Arnold asks a very important question here. For F3 Res and F5 Res, will you need a BMFA B certificate?
It will be Buckminster rules. Now, I don't think you need an A or a B to fly at Buckminster.
Maybe we'll wait for Andy to confirm that one.
Yeah. But in principle, no. But obviously, if you're not safe, then we'll stop you.
John Minchell, Inchworm plan also on outer zone. And I know 4 models being built for light scale, in brackets, 2 are mine.
That was nice.
Right. Pete Newman, you're not alone in finding 100S changed, Andy.
That's kind of you to say so, Pete. What I would like very much is for the Silent Flight Technical Committee to introduce a classic 100S competition, so we get back to grassroots, because the competitions that were organised back in the 70s had 40 odd entries, and we had 8 entries at the competition that I went to, which has now been cancelled through lack of entries. So let's get back to grassroots and reduce the costs, reduce the complexity.
Right. John's just pointed out, Darren has just asked to be a Facebook member, so you've got another one. So you're increasing as we talk.
John, John's approved him. John Menschel, myself, and Martin Kinder are admins on the site. So,
cool. Louis Hawkins again. Will there be a decentralised postal competition for F3 and F5 Res?
That's a very good idea. Barks are holding an F3 one at the moment. I'm not sure if they're holding an F5. Is Martin Kinder on?
No, I haven't seen Martin. I did look earlier. He wasn't earlier, so
if Martin Kinder's on, he'll be able to answer that.
yeah.
He's not. That's a shame.
Pete Newman. I don't know whether you know the answer.
Certainly on the Bark site, they have an F3 res postal competition, which runs every fortnight.
Cool. I don't know whether you know the answer to this one, but Pete Newman, have you got dates set for the August Sherlow meeting, or is there a web link?
The answer is no to that, but can we bring John Minchell on?
We can bring John into that. Should I just get through a few more? Or do you want to take over? You take over some of the questions while I bring John in. Okay.
Okay. It's the August Sherlow. Glenn Davis, can you mention the Mike Kitchenware Sherlow, very close to Shrewsbury? Darren Graham, it should be 125 to 135. That, I take it, is the aircraft that you're designing for us, Darren. Glenn Davis, can you mention the BFA Festival of Scale Helicopters being held at Buckminster 12th of September, which will be a fun flying with a scale helicopter flying competition split into side classes, all standards welcome. There we go. I've mentioned it. Mike Phantom. The only way to stop experts winning is to have a no-skill event, i.e. a raffle. Who wants that? Yeah, thanks, Mike. Very good.
We have John. John's in the room now, just John, to let you know.
Can you answer the Sherlow one, John?
I certainly can, yes. Because the main BMFA Nationals were cancelled over the August bank holiday weekend, there is a possibility that I can book one or even two of those dates, and we could hold F3 and F5 res meeting there. Sherlow is a privately owned airstrip that a guy flies his Cubs and Huskies and stuff like that out of. And it's about 8 miles due east of Shrewsbury, slightly north of Telford. And it's just on the edge of the Shawbury ATZ. The other option is, because I did have a weekend booked at the end of September, which is the 25th and 26th. And we were going to do a GPS triangle racing weekend there, but that's now been cancelled due to some other technical issues. That is already booked, unlike the August bank holiday weekend, and we could utilise that as well, which would then give us Buckminster at the end of June, Buckminster at the end of July, Sherlow at the end of August, and Sherlow at the end of September. Now, both are pretty much on the same line, north-south of the country, but one's on the East Midlands and Sherlock is effectively the West Midlands, because it's only another 12 miles and you're in Wales. So those are both possibilities. If the turnout in Buckminster in June and July is good and it's well supported, then I'm quite happy to organise the airfield such that we can do the same in the end of September and the end of August.
John, thank you very much.
That's brilliant, John. Thanks. As far as advertising, should we advertise it on the Facebook site?
I'm happy to do that. What I want to do first is see what happens at the very first June event.
Yeah.
If nobody turns up, I'm not going to put myself out to do all the organising.
No, that's absolutely fine. What I'm saying is, when it's confirmed.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
We'll stick it on the Facebook site.
I'll stick it on Box as well, and we can do all of that.
So if people keep an eye on the Facebook site, then they should get the latest information.
Yep, no problem.
Couple more questions, Andy, and John's in the room as well, so you may chip in with these. Darren Graham, again, a statement, it should be 125 to 135.
That will be the kit that he's producing.
Right, okay. So we've got a bit of advertising in there. Good. Barry Park, we'll take some credit for that later. Barry Parkinson, flying electric models, what duration do you need for light scale?
I would say about 10 minutes minimum to run through the BMFA schedule.
Okay. Derek Lowerbridge is raising an old chestnut here. With experts winning, wouldn't a handicap system work? The more they win, levelling the field.
I'm reluctant to do that because it makes a lot of effort, and I tried banning winners in scale, but I got a lot of pressure to bring the winners back in, because the people who weren't winning said they wanted to fly against the winners to give themselves a bit of competition. So you can't really win on that one.
Michael Kitchen is suggesting you need to promote the objectives in SAM35 and Aero Modeler and any other way to get the youngsters involved and away from their game controllers.
Do the youngsters, excuse me, do the youngsters read Aero Modeler and SAM35? But it is a very good point. Right.
Colin Leafield, is it worth approaching the clubs and asking them to promote these ideas and encourage members to have a go, even get some club team entries? Andy, if you don't mind, I'd like to answer that one. I think,
please do.
I think with clubs, what the BMFA is trying to do at the minute, and I can speak from the highest position, that we are trying desperately to work better with clubs. We are trying to introduce them for things like in the air tonight. We're going to get some clubs talking out towards the end of this year and probably through the summer, because we do need to, to sort of provide this information, try and help. So I think there's a better communication. I think the answer is yes. That's my point of view. Andy, please, follow on from that.
No, that's good. Thank you for that.
How do you control the motor in F5 Res?
In F5 Res, it's done by a controller that controls either height or motor runtime. We're going to go, I believe, for 100 meters and or 30 seconds. But it's a little gadget that you put in the circuit. Jim Wright might be able to help me on that in respect of timing, because he's been looking at it for.
We've got a question from Jim in a minute, so we'll probably get him to ask that one to you directly. I'll bring him in a moment.
If you could hold that as well, Jim, on the motor control, the time and the height in F5 Res.
Next question: are the June and July meetings for both F3 and F5?
Yes, please.
Right, they are done. Excellent. Mike Phantom, the Barks 14-day challenge is for F3 Res and F5 Res.
There we go.
Another one. Yeah, Darren saying correct. We've got that one. Louis Hawkins, can you say anything about motor? Oh, we've done that one. Sorry, that one's popped up again. There is quite a bit of F3, F5 Res activity on the Barks forum. That's from Mike, just giving you a heads up on that. Dempster Hamilton, potential competitions may be put off by the cost time of travel to major events. I'd love to see more locally organised introductory events. Any thoughts on how the BMFA might incentivise model flying clubs? There's often resistance from members reluctant to lose their Sunday afternoon sport flying. I guess, Andy, the question might be to that we need to consider some club postal events, some sort of where it's held at the local. So again, sort of decentralised type venues.
That's certainly something to consider on F3 and F5 Res. I'll take that one away and think about that one.
Right. Do you want to pick up a question, and I'll bring Jim into the room to ask his question?
So Gary Madeline spent the last month building 2 F3 Res from Hyperflight. Flew the first on Friday. Can't wait to fly them with the rest of you guys. Lovely. First flight, I checked the Eli and climbed to 400 feet without a bungee under 3 red kites in lift. Excellent. Excellent.
Well, if Gary's coming in, he'll be towing it as well, probably. So that's good to see.
That's great. Where are we? Darren Graham, by far the best way to encourage is Facebook and Twitter. Yeah, unfortunately, Darren, you're right on that one. But there we go.
One question just come through. I'm not sure we're in the position to answer this unless John knows about this. Any news on Funfly? We may. What I'll do is, I think I'll have a chat with Funfly and see what their events are. If they're not on the BMFA calendar, then we'll try and give them a little chivvy along for everybody. And that's Simon asking that one.
Jim, 2 questions. You have a comment, which if you could explain on that, please. But also, I know you were looking at height and time limitations for F5 res. If you could expand on that, I'd be grateful.
Sure. We use
Jim, can you just have a bit more volume, please? Sorry, any chance?
Yes, just a minute. How's that?
That's a lot better.
Right. We use height limiters that are set to 100 meters or 30 seconds, whichever is the soonest. So what we found from we've been running clubs through club events at Ivinghoe on our flat field. And we've been doing some testing with F3 and F5 res, particularly F5 res. And what we found is that 100 meters is about as high as you want to go with those models. Now, it depends very much on the conditions and the individual flyer, but we find that 100 meters is enough. The device fits between the receiver and the motor controller, and it just cuts the motor out, whichever is the soonest, 100 meters or 30 seconds. Usually you can't then restart the motor for, I think it's 10 or 20 seconds, but usually you're at such a height that it doesn't matter, but that works well. Okay. You can get them from, there are a number of sources. Bernie Jones sells them, I believe. I think Hyperflight has one. There are several people who have them, right? So that's that one. The other point that I think you wanted me to answer was about the
Res Eagle.
Res Eagle. Yeah. We have at Ivinghoe, we have inter-club competitions for flat field soaring, electric and bunge, foamies and various things. We have inter-club event with Aylesbury Club. We go to them, they come to us, and so on. And one guy built an F3 Res Eagle, and he says that on the bungee the wings tend to flutter somewhat, and he's a good builder. So just be aware that it's not the most rigid structure on the Res Eagle, but for the slower flying F5 version, it's probably fine. That's just a view, all right? Don't want to put you off, but that's a point, okay?
Certainly something to consider, isn't it?
It is, yeah, okay. Something you mentioned about trying to encourage people to fly, Mark, in competitions. I would encourage clubs to make contact with other local clubs and fly into club competitions, which is a bit of fun. And that reduces the amount of travel involved. You get to know people in the other club, you go to their field, they come to your field. And, you know, it works well for us. I mean, we don't get an awful lot of people, but it works, you know.
Jim, you're absolutely right. I think there's a bit of momentum at the moment. We're looking at certain things, and I'd love to see even a national inter-club competition for a number of classes, because what we have learned from the survey data that we got back, that the majority of our members really don't want to travel too far. 10, 15, 20 miles is what they would like to do to go flying. So, we do need to cater for that. And that's something that Andy, John, yourself, anybody who's running these events or trying to organise events or create new events, I think really we have to listen to.
Well, I mean, we publish a quarterly magazine in Ivanhoe called The Beacon. I'll send you a copy, Mark. Andy sees it because he's a member. And on the back of that, we advertise their dates and our dates. So we all know what we're doing. We've also recently set up, as well as having a Facebook group, we've got a private group on Telegram that we use to alert people if we have to make a change of plan at short notice. So, for example, we were supposed to have a flat field electric soaring event last Thursday, but it was washed out. and we only cancelled it on the Thursday morning. So we actually phoned round a few people, but Telegram is a good way to get to people's mobile phones, and somewhat less cluttered than Facebook.
Yeah. So yeah, Dempster's just sort of reiterating interclub events provide benefit in many ways, which is is something I think we should start to look at. Adrian Hayward, is there not a case for a set number of similar designs for F3 and F5 res?
I need a bit more information to answer that. Could you get Adrian on?
We can get Adrian on.
You mean
what I'd like to know is why he would suggest it.
Have a little look at Marcus's question while I find him then, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, I need to scroll down to Marcus. The question relates to Scale RC fixed wing, as that is my only experience. Is there any impetus to encourage young or perhaps younger people to enter competitions? Things like the RC2 standoff seem like a good option to encourage an introduction to traditional skills, but heavily penalise ARTFs. What is extensively modified for originality? And kits score less, very subject to judges' interpretation, but hard as an interest party. I'm not sure what RC2 standoff means, but certainly on the standoff rules and the F4C rules in BMFA, then the modeler is given, the modeler who designed and built his own model will get more marks than the modeler who has a pre-built kit or pre-designed model or uses a lot of commercial parts, which is really the basis of producing a scale model. So you get recompense for what you put into it. If you want to get into scale flying, then the ARTFs are absolutely perfect for the job. And Alistair Foote won the flying only nationals in 2018, I think it was, with an ARTF foam. It's either Venom or a Vampire ducted fan aeroplane. So it is possible to get to the top in national competition using an ARTF. It's only when you get into the static judging side of standoff and F4C that they start to get penalised. But that is the basis of. At the beginning of the chat today, I said we need to maintain the high standard of our national teams. So we don't want to dumb down the teams. And the national teams compete in standoff, which is really F4H, and F4C at international level. So we need to keep that right at the top, which means that the models need to be designed, built, and finished by the modeler. If they're not, then they'll lose marks and they won't be competitive on the international scene. But if you want to build up to that, then you go for the ARTF and you go into the flying only route. So yeah, there we go. Not a very good answer to the question, and probably not the answer that you want. But
we've got Adrian in the room. I'll just put one more thing over to Jim from Louis, just responding. I've increased the carbon spar to the outer panels as recommended to 5mm diameter. Will this help to avoid the flutter to the Eagle? Thanks for the help and potential problem.
The answer is yes, I would think so. There were the early versions of the Res Eagle did have thinner spars, I believe, and so the later ones they did beef it up a bit. If you built it from the kit or the part kit, then yeah, it probably got thicker spar.
Thank you.
So it's probably all right. Can I just add a couple of things about F3 Res, please?
Please do, Jim.
Okay, about bungee in particular. The German rules are for 100 meter of line, which I think is to be not less than 0.7mm diameter, and 15 meters of bungee, which is 6mm internal and 8mm external diameter. Now, we've done a bit of my clubmate John Snell, who's probably on this session, and I have done some testing with this. John's actually produced some data about different pools and stretches. But our flat field isn't that big, so we've been flying off a 50 meters of line, but a lighter weight than 0.7 diameter. In fact, it's some 30 millimeter fishing line that I happen to have, a 30-pound breaking strain fishing line, and a 10 meters of bungee. And we find that's quite good. Okay. Now that actually, if you think about it, that equates well to what an F1A A2 glider is launched off, 50 meters plus 10. And we actually think that's quite a good way to go, especially for club events. Okay, because club fields are probably not that big. So don't be put off by having to run 100 meters plus 15, used 50 meters plus 10. That's our suggestion. All right. Okay. The only other thing I would mention is somebody put a question about the motor for F5 res. Yeah. There are a number of sources for that. Hyperflight, to mention them yet again, sell an inexpensive motor that I think is under £15, which I've got several of them and they work fine. To name another company, 4Max, that's number 4 hyphen Max. They sell some very nice little motors, which are also inexpensive. They also sell speed controllers. So, you know, these things can be acquired for not an enormous amount of money. If your pockets are nice and deep and you can afford it, then of course you can buy yourself a hacker motor for these F5 res models, which will put you back something in the region of 60 to 70 pounds. But one of my club mates has a hacker. I have a £15 motor, and frankly, I can't see the difference. All right.
Thank you.
I'm glad you said that, Jim, because I've got the same motor as you, the Hyperflight version.
Okay. Yeah. The only thing I would say about the Hyperflight one is just be careful. It's not as robust as the Hiker. That's the only thing I'd say.
Other manufacturers are available.
There are.
Adrian, let's bring you in. Sorry, you've been sitting there patiently. Thank you. You might need to unmute, though. Well done.
Evening, gents. Thanks for this. Basically, just the idea was that where you get, call them the checkbook modelers that can buy the best of any particular design, it would then provoke manufacturers to do a much better, more exacting design, shall we say, at a much bigger price tag. Why not just limit the aircraft to be used to one of, say, 5 designs?
At the moment, I don't think we need to, because the cost of the kits, the maximum cost is around 230, 240. And the only ARTF model that I've found is 330. So I don't think that's excessive, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, like, for the younger modelers to get into it, the price tag is a big thing.
If it starts to get to a silly level, then yes, that might be a way to go in the future. But I would suggest that on the formula for F3 and F5 res, that if a manufacturer comes in with a very high spec, high cost model, I don't think it would be competitive compared to the cheaper versions. Because the models that are available at the moment between 150, 250 pounds seem to be of equivalent performance.
Okay, good point.
So if it comes to it, then yes, that might be something to look at in the future. But I don't think we need to at the moment, to be honest.
Oh,
yeah.
I see Tony Bennett's put in light scale, is there a wingspan or construction material spec? No, there isn't. It's just weight only, Tony. Models are built to either flying only, standoff scale, or F4C rules, depending on which competition. And at the moment, light scale is only flying only. So the only limit is that it needs to be BMFA legal and less than 5 kilos.
Really interesting what Trevor Waters is saying. They used to fly in the Ron Finnis Trophy among Kent clubs in the early 100-inch days. Flew us into club teams, towing and spotting for each other, team member. It worked well. So I think there's something in that, Andy, something worth thinking about possibly for next year, I would have thought.
Yeah. Can I just make a point there, Andy? Just on the basis that you're trying to attract with F3 and F5 res, not the scale, on the basis you're trying to attract new people into the class to fly thermal soarers, it isn't just the people who are already glider pilots. It may be somebody who's flying scale who wants to have a go at something else, or somebody who's flying pylon races whose eyesight isn't getting as good for such a fast model. And the fact that they're already modelers, they will have a box of spare balsa and offcuts and a couple of sheets of ply and this, that, and the other. And if you get a plan, you can probably build a model for zero expenditure on the structure out of your spares box of materials.
Yes.
Most of us who have been modelers for even just 5 or 10 years have got a collection of old kit model boxes full of balsa, ply, spruce, bits and pieces, and a bottle of glue, and away you go with a plan. And you can actually build the structure for virtually nothing. And I priced up, there was a lively discussion going on Barks this last week, and I priced up at a certain Far Eastern manufacturer a complete powertrain for F5 res at 30 to 35 quid. And that was the battery, the speed controller, two batteries, the speed controller and the motor. So it's not exactly expensive at 30 odd quid. It's the same cost as buying a bungee. And then you've still got to buy the dog stake for the anchored end and 50 meters of line. And just taking up Jim Wright's point, the Barks 2-week postal thing that Martin Kinder runs is already using that 10 meters of bungee and 50 meters of line as if you like, a small field bungee for launching. So it's great to have confirmation from Jim that it works well at the Ivanhoe field. And I used to be a member of Aylesbury, and we used to fly inter-club competitions with the guys down in Hemel Hempstead, as well as the ISA, of which I was a member as well when I was living down there. But yeah, so there's many different routes for different groups of people, be it a drone flyer or an RC car racer or a scale model pilot, to get into the gliding side. And this is basically how Andy's trying to sort of pitch it at the moment, I think.
Tim Morton raises a really interesting topic. It comes up in many aspects of my BMFA life, and I know Andy's, John and Jim. He likes the idea of light scale very much, but have never seen anything in BMFA magazines. Why not do an article? I think
I'm going to answer that one. I've put it into my column several times. It's been in the scale column. But I think what I'll do on the next scale column is entitle it Light Scale and have a word with the editor and see if he'll put it up as that. And I'll concentrate on light scale within that, and let's see what happens. So, yes, it's already been there, Tim. If you don't read the column, you won't see it.
I would add to that as well, though, and I think it does take volunteers. I think what everybody in the room needs to realise as well, that we are all volunteers. And, those who fly this, anybody who comes into light scale, step up and write a beginner's column on it or something. We need to introduce other people to help. Andy's only got so much time, and I'm speaking for Andy now because I know he does write an awful lot. So I'll get off my podium. But
can I just mention on that point, there is a scale competition, BMFA scale RC competition at Warwick's, which is Dundonald, which will be a bit closer to whoever the chap was that was just talking from Scotland. And he could go along and see if there's any light scale entries there, or at least talk to the guys flying the flying only competition. And that's on May the 30th, so a couple of weekends' time, if that helps.
Thank you, John, for that. Whilst you're on speaker there, Louis Hawkins, could you let me have the details for the powertrain for the F5 res, please?
From me?
Yes. I can help you with that.
Well, could you do something? Put it on a little email, and we'll tag it to the In the Air Tonight website.
Okay. Andy, Mr. Sephton, sir. If I'm not correct me if I'm wrong, but on the Facebook page for F5 and F3 Res, I think you posted some extract articles from our club magazine, which gave,
yes, I did.
Yeah, which give quite a lot of detail about comparing engines and motors and props and ESCs and all that stuff, and weights that we all, because a load of us built the X-Res model as an F5 model, and I did a spreadsheet which I think Andy put on there, which compares the comparative results of that, which actually vary quite a bit.
It's also got the powertrains, the motors, the prop,
that's right,
the ESCs. So who answered that question? That's Derek. Derek Lowbridge. If you're not on the Facebook site, Derek, could I suggest that you get on it, and you'll find some answers on there already.
Brilliant. No, that's good.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jim. Thanks.
Okay.
If I could just change tack while we've still got the majority of people in the room, just do a plug for next month. We're currently running one a month at the moment of In the Air Tonight. Next month, it's most likely to be the first week in June, and it'll be a JMA, so it's a jet session. So should be quite fun. We're just sort of clarifying all the details, but we'll get that on the website and get it publicised as soon as possible on that. Eric Friend, Kent Interclub Soaring meetings are still alive and well. Look on the Barks website, calendar for comps organised for this year. So some more flying there. Wayne Butler, any good plans for F5 Res?
Same as F3 Res.
Right.
That's all I will say.
Very good. Derek Lowbridge, what are your plans on types of bungee? Silicon or bungee cord?
Silicon.
Right.
There's a guy on Barks.
Bungee cord is too hard.
Say again, John.
Sorry, I spoke over Andy there. There's a guy, David, can't remember his name, making bungees and selling them through Barks.
Correct.
Okay. Yep. So check the Barks website.
There is, but the question was silicon or cord. The cord ones are far too harsh. They haven't got enough stretch, and they give it back too quickly. Whereas the silicon ones are nice and soft, and you can re-stretch them in the air, get more height if there's a little bit of wind.
That's called kiting.
Precisely.
Yeah. Unless you're doing the same as circle towing, but that's a little bit of an acquired art.
Yeah. Dempster's saying something very nice. Thank you, Dempster.
It's exactly what I've just
Heroes
said.
is beyond
reach. We agree. Let me read this out for everybody. Dempster, I wonder if people dismiss articles within the BMFA news from our heroes as beyond their reach. I sense we'd make a greater impact if we could somehow make activities more local and within their reach. But I'm struggling to suggest how this may happen. Well, it's exactly what I said. We did this with F1D indoor, and whilst I fly at the highest level, we had a mentoring scheme, and one of the guys who popped onto the mentoring scheme wrote 2 or 3 wonderful articles of what it was like to be able to be up and coming and learning the skills, and it brought on 2 or 3 other really good members. So I think it's Dempster. I think you touched the right nerve there. It's absolutely right, and we probably ought to promote, those who are coming into the sport, into that specific discipline, that genre, to write some articles, and we probably need to plug a little bit harder. But again, we all need to cajole people in doing this. So, anybody who knows somebody, cajole them into writing an article, even if it's only 2 or 3 paragraphs. Let's hear from some newcomers and new to the sport.
I think that's a very good point of getting newcomers to start writing, because there are big names in the BMFA mag who are doing the writing at the moment, and perhaps we need a change. Can we bring Darren on board so that he can have a little bit more of a plug for his new model?
Colin's just written a question for you. If you can grab that one, I'll bring.
I live near Sephton Park, and it used to be model plane heaven. It's not anymore. I see it from. It's not super. How do we find good sites for free flight these days? Is there a list of sites anywhere? With difficulty, and I've no idea. Is the short answer to that one. What's happened? There's a lot of interesting thing happening on free flight, and clubs like the Peterborough Club in particular a chap called John Ashmole and Sam 35. So John also looks after Sam 35 on the Free Flight Technical Committee. We're downsizing, or he's downsizing a lot of the competitive events. So on the flyer, you'll have seen a SAMS E20, which is a 20-inch wingspan, 20-inch length electric model with a max normally of around 40 seconds that can be used on smaller sites. The Peterborough Club also runs a P20 competition, which is rubber power, maximum length 20 inches, maximum span 20 inches. So models are getting smaller. They're also concentrating on precision competitions where you go for an aimed flight time of around, say, 30 seconds. And any second below or above that, then you lose points. So you go for a set flight time rather than a maximum flight time. And again, that reduces the size of the field that's required. But good sites, yeah, very difficult. And is there a list? I've no idea. Maybe you could help on that, Mark.
Don't forget, Andy, that Buckminster has free flight every Monday as a priority.
They do, but Buckminster's not a very big site.
No, but it's an option.
You're looking at a max of about 50 seconds in anything other than up to about 5 knots, 50 seconds works, and above 5 knots you're looking at a 40-second, 30-second max, which is not really very much.
This year, I mean, in answer to your question, Andy, this year's been pretty difficult, as you're aware, same as last year, and there's still a lot of COVID restrictions out there. So it's not brilliant suggesting places at the moment because there's so many that are closed because of restrictions. So I think we've probably got another 6 or 8 weeks. We might be able to open up some other places, but again, local restrictions apply to a lot. So Darren, welcome.
You're muted, Darren.
Andy's all
you open your mouth. Welcome, and thank you for the emails and also introducing your new kit. I think Jim's involved with that as well, aren't you?
Not really. We've talked about it, Darren. But
okay.
Yeah. That's at the club evenings we have. Jim sort of mentioned it to me, which is what made me get involved with it in the first place. So the situation at the moment is that we've got Barry Lever is doing the CAD work for the F3 Res version. Now you were Andy, you were asking me about the wing chord on the email.
Yes.
And increasing to 100-inch. Well, that at the moment the wing chord's 205 mil. Now, for the RES version, I think it may naturally reduce anyway, as he's designing it. So somewhere between the two, we can probably have a selection of wings for the same model. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I just
perhaps not for the RES one. Will be a bit too small, I would think. But
I'll just get everybody else involved in the conversation. What my fundamental aim is to get 100S back to its grassroots, and what I would like to see is a classic 100S competition where we go back to 2-channel models with bungee launches. And as Darren is doing a kit, I just as a one-liner, I said, can you make it 100-inch wingspan so that it would be applicable for any 100S classic competition? Should it develop into that? Well, so that's why I asked the question, John. You.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, it was just you mentioned 2-channel there, Andy. So I'm assuming you mean rudder elevator. Are you specifically counting out 100S having air brakes then? Because all of the ones I ever flew in the 80s and 90s, like algebras and things, there were 3 channels, so they all had spoilers or air brakes.
Originally, 100S was just 2-channel.
Yes.
Rudder elevator.
Yeah, you're talking back in the 70s, but in the 80s and 90s, it was 3-channel.
In 81, it was 2-channel, which is when I started. But
it was probably about 85 when I flew algebras.
Either way,
if there is a set of points to be gained from hitting a spot or within a couple of meters of a spot, then air brakes are going to be an advantage. It was just,
I mean,
just a question.
either way with the model, as the model's designed, whether you use the spoiler or you build it so that the spoiler's not there or whatever you do, it's just the builder's option.
Okay.
You know, it won't actually make any difference to the structure of the model.
And are you going to kit this then, Darren?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, the 100 inch is purely something that was mentioned to me earlier today. But for me to produce it as a kit, it's just a question of lengthening a spar and adding more ribs. You know, maybe reducing the wing chord or something like that. It's minutes work with a CAD drawn design. You know,
Mike Phantom's just come back in and said, "Don't need 100S and a 2 meter class?" ?
No, we don't. But a lot of people have said you're reinventing the wheel. You reinvented 100S. A number of other people have said F3 res doesn't work in the UK because it's too small, and they don't fly very well in wind. Well, we haven't found that out yet. We'll see how it goes. But if 100S does become a disaster, then I think there's a good argument to reintroduce classic 100S. That's all. It's only an aside. I wouldn't like it to become.
The 100S model, if I did it, would be the Condor S1 with a stretched wing, basically. The RAS model would be a different thing, you know. Although we could replicate the design with the spoiler from the RAS model and just plant it straight into the 100-inch version. The Condor S1 at the moment is 2.3 meters, so it's a small increase. You know.
Andy, would you like to wrap up in terms of just final on your presentation? We've got through all the questions and you've answered all of those, and then I can just stop the live feed, and then it can then you can have a little bit more of a free for all.
Well, that's it really. What more can I say? If you can make it onto the Facebook group, you'll find out what we're doing in F3 and F5 res. If you can make it to any of the scale competitions and do light scale, then I'd be absolutely delighted. And if you could come to the Peterborough Flying Aces event in September this year, then I'm sure the Peterborough Club will be delighted. I would be delighted to see you, and we can hopefully meet you there.
Andy, thank you.
I think we've done it to death now.
And thank you all the guest appearances. It's been wonderful. And I notice our other host has come back. Andy also is, but the other Andy's back in the room. So
well, he knew we were about to finish. You see.
So I'm going to stop the live stream after thanking you again, Andy. And yeah, I mean, we'll just carry this conversation on out of the live. Thanks.